Hello everyone. Welcome to Mind Podcast Buddhism. Today, we will talk about the topic, the supreme and most happy in Buddhism. In this episode, we will explore the profound teachings and insights that define the ultimate happiness and supreme state according to Buddhist philosophy. Join us as we delve into the conversations and wisdom that illuminate the path to true contentment and spiritual fulfillment. The supreme and most blissful in Buddhism. The main topics of this content are the supreme and the most blissful aspects. The sutra revolves around a dialogue between two spiritual leaders, the Buddha, the spiritual teacher of the path of enlightenment, and the ascetic Upadesi, a spiritual practitioner from the ascetic tradition. This dialogue takes place in the presence of all the followers of the ascetic Upadesi. Through the dialogue, the Buddha established that a person deemed to have universal knowledge, meaning possessing omniscient knowledge both while awake and asleep, as popularly exalted and idolized, does not measure up to even 1/10 of the value of a person who understands the principles of cause and effect and dependent origination. The second content delves into the differing viewpoints between Buddhism and the ascetic tradition on the path leading to the highest happiness. The ascetics believe that the path to the highest happiness is the cessation of all unethical behaviors, essentially asserting that the moral path is the path to happiness. In contrast, the Buddha asserts that while the moral path is a very important foundational beginning, it is not the entirety of the path to happiness. Therefore, spiritual practitioners, besides fulfilling their personal moral values, must also complete the values of meditation. These are the two fundamental points raised in this sutra. From Sutra number 75 onward, we notice a consistency in introducing the content through dialogues. Notably, the heated debates on worldly matters abruptly pause when the Buddha is present, marking the commencement of a dialogue between the Buddha and the ascetics. This indirectly shows us that the non-Buddhist ascetics following the ascetic tradition have a considerable respect for religious matters. What they have learned from their tradition and what they hear rumored from the spiritual tradition of Buddhism share similarities but also have differences. However, when given the opportunity to encounter these differences, they open their minds comfortably, without prejudice against what is different from their own beliefs. It can be said that the ascetic movement, including Buddhism, is genuinely a free and democratic movement in terms of spirituality. The origin of the ascetic movement is a resistance in epistemology and religion, refusing to acknowledge all the established truths proclaimed in the Vedic scriptures, breaking away from the Vedic tradition which heavily emphasized caste issues and all social institutions revolving around this caste system. The ascetics became truly free individuals, liberal and striving to find a new spiritual path to fill the gaps in the spiritual path of Brahmanism in general. Thanks to the attitude of dissatisfaction and discontent with the existing religious institutions, most people following the ascetic path learned and absorbed this liberal spirit. This is the starting point of the spiritual path. When approaching the spiritual path merely through belief, the value achieved is only those institutions. The truthfulness or falsity of its value depends entirely on these institutions. Approaching through the lens of belief, if these institutions are aligned with ethics and spirituality, our devotion through the lens of belief will open up a positive direction. Otherwise, we will accumulate more religious notions that deep involvement in them may bind us, losing true happiness. The Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, was one of these ascetics. His spiritual path was entirely different in that he had experienced all that was considered and rumored. When he himself was part of experiencing that spiritual quality and substance, he realized that its true value was completely different from the rumors. Departing from the ascetic tradition, he began his own way, seeking the middle path, transcending all attachments to the hedonistic ideology that could lead people deeper into degradation, and the ascetic path that could make people sick, achieving a calm mind but lacking wisdom and clarity. Through such engagement, he clearly saw the limitations of this new spiritual path of the ascetics. Despite its contribution of resistance on the spirit of freedom and democracy about what should not be and what is not worth believing in, regardless of its deep-rooted cultural tradition of thousands of years. This is one of the important premises that opened the innovation and renewal. The Buddhist spiritual path encourages the exploration of spiritual values rather than passively inheriting them by accepting everything unconditionally. Unconditional belief still has value in establishing quick practice into the teachings, leading to immediate mental peace. However, with unconditional belief, the arising of wisdom as a path to resolving impasses is a completely different issue, requiring intellectual verification to see if it truly brings long-term peace. Fortunately and successfully, the Buddha created a new measure for the spiritual path. When he was present, the ongoing heated debates became absolutely silent and solemn. In previous sutras, the ascetics only encountered his disciples such as Sariputta, Moggallana, Ananda, or occasionally met lay Buddhist practitioners. This was a rare opportunity, face-to-face with the Tathagata, whose spiritual values had been rumored and questioned whether those rumors were true or just empty propaganda. Therefore, to ensure the content was confirmed, the ascetic Upadhyasi instructed all his disciples and lay followers present at that time to maintain solemnity and absolute silence, as this was the principle of the Buddha. If the environment was not peaceful, the dialogue would not take place. Following the advice, everyone focused their minds on the Buddha. No omniscience at all times. The first question that the ascetic Upadhyasi posed to the Buddha was, "Lord, I am very puzzled and doubtful about the claims of omniscience by Nigantha Nātaputta, who asserts that he possesses unbroken, continuous knowledge, whether walking, standing, sleeping, or waking. Yet when I asked him about the past, he avoided the question, responded irrelevantly, and displayed anger and resentment." Nigantha Nātaputta, known in Vietnamese as Ni Kien Tu, was the founder of Jainism. He is understood to have attained enlightenment 6 years before the Buddha and lived contemporaneously with him for several years. This dialogue is indirect. Instead of directly questioning the Buddha, Upadhyasi refers to another spiritual teacher. This is a spiritual trap. If at that moment the Buddha had criticized or attacked Nigantha Nātaputta, it would have confirmed the suspicion that the Buddha's reputation was baseless. The essence of an enlightened being, even when seeing the limitations of others, is not to nitpick or attack when provoked, but to present issues constructively and with a focus on higher objectives. The spiritual discussions about the truth and rumors were common among the ascetics of the Shramana tradition whenever they had the opportunity to meet in remote forests or mountains, and they were often left unsatisfied. Being freethinkers, Shramanas liked to travel, and whenever they heard of a spiritual master of significant stature, they would approach him to seek new values for themselves. Some pursuits led to satisfaction, while others resulted in profound disappointment. The trap set here is profound, and the Buddha's response is equally profound. He said, "The answer to the question raised can only be satisfying if the dialogue occurs between two individuals who possess the knowledge of past lives and insight into the cycle of birth and death. Otherwise, it becomes meaningless." In the spiritual tradition of Buddhism, Tukman Men refers to the ability to recall past lives, not just the immediate past, but stretching back across an immeasurable span of time. This includes detailed recollection of one's name, family, marriage, social status, happiness, suffering, wealth or poverty, and various interactions in each life. Tianyanmen, on the other hand, is understood as the ability to see clearly the causal relationships of people's actions from the present connecting to the future. Actions taken in the present, A, result in specific outcomes, A plus or A, which can sometimes neutralize and become neutral or balanced reactions. This mechanism of karma, considered as individual karma and collective karma of a community, nation, or country, is clearly perceived by those who possess Tianyanmen. If the dialogue does not take place with such individuals, how can the listener verify the accuracy of what is presented? Thus, the Buddha's point was that it would be futile to focus on whether the omniscience of Nigantha Nātaputta is genuine or merely an empty claim. Moreover, discussions in the absence of the third party become meaningless and might be seen as slander or criticism without giving the person a chance to defend themselves. Hence, the Buddha's response skillfully avoided the debate trap set by the ascetic Upadhyasi. The present is a miracle, Afterward, the Buddha steered the conversation towards a very practical direction. The most important thing I want to share with you is to forget the past and also to forget the future, and remember that we are living in the present. When anyone brings up past events, it means we are discussing the past. The value of the past exists in its own time, with those directly or indirectly related to it, while we are discussing something that involves neither the first person nor the second person. Thus, what value does it have? And mentioning the future, which is inherently uncertain due to the chain of mental perceptions leading to actions, is also not reliable. Therefore, the Buddha redirected Upadesi from debating about a past event or person to directly facing him. The central content of the conversation here must revolve around such issues. Here, we can learn and apply this. Often when having a conversation, we don't discuss the matters between the two of us, but talk about others. The more we talk about a third person, the more likely it leads to dissatisfaction between the two present, potentially turning friendship or kinship into conflict or opposition. Hence, focusing on the reality as it is crucial to resolve issues. In other words, the focus of the conversation, as suggested by the Buddha, should be on the reality of as it is, and the method of dialogue should be talking with rather than talking about. We speak with someone who is listening and vice versa. This ensures that the conversation feels serious, unlike talking about another person. The nature of an event from the past or future cannot provide nourishment for the mind or practical value for the two people. Therefore, in family life, whether between spouses, children, siblings, or relatives, we should follow the Buddha's method. If someone brings a troublesome story from the office to our attention, a Buddhist should know how to steer the discussion back to what is happening now. Instead of worrying about others' children, we should focus on our own. Instead of discussing strangers, we should discuss matters between the two of us. Instead of citing irrelevant matters, we should bring up our current concerns to find solutions. This way, the quality of family life will improve significantly. By following the Buddha's example, we should aim to bring discussions back to the present reality among those present, rather than those absent. Because the truth regarding the absent cannot be verified, and going into deep detail becomes pointless. Stopping the past and future is very important. Historians and archaeologists strive to pull us back to the past to help us cultivate knowledge about culture and customs. This knowledge becomes valuable experience if used correctly. Its significance lies in providing insight, provided it is analyzed methodically to create historical lessons rather than merely presenting common historical events and guessing their subsequent reactions. Thus, studying history is to draw lessons, avoid repeating mistakes, and serve oneself in the present or future to not become a similar victim. From a Buddhist perspective, the value of history, including archaeology and similar fields, lies here. In this context, Upadeshi's discussion veered towards dissatisfaction and disappointment due to the rumored omniscient abilities of the great spiritual teacher Nigantha. However, through his questioning, we see that verifying someone's omniscience depends on whether they can demonstrate perfect knowledge of the past and future with evidence. If the answer is no, then the rumor is merely a rumor and could lead to idolatry, personal superstition, and blind faith prevalent in many theistic, monotheistic, or polytheistic religions. Claiming an omniscient personality based on infallibility, knowing everything accurately in life, is easy to declare but hard to confirm. Upadesi refers to the past, not just a few decades ago but past lives, and Nigantha inability to answer shows his lack of this power, leading him to evade. When it comes to the process of reincarnation, his inability is also evident. Similarly, this applies to those claiming to be prophets. When asked about any specific event, especially related to themselves, if they cannot answer, then claims like, "I can know about others and events 1,000 years ahead," lack logical basis. This is the fundamental measure to assess the depth of someone labeled as omniscient. Religions often exalt and exaggerate the omniscient powers of their founders. But realistically, analyzing the events described in their scriptures, the two factors of past and future do not support the belief that the character possesses such a personality. Thus, when hearing claims of such powers, we only need to consider the past and future to verify their authenticity, or if it is just a cover for another purpose. Therefore, in the scriptures, the Buddha advised monks, even if they possess such abilities, not to display them unless for educational purposes, to help people believe in cause and effect and guide them towards the righteous path. Exhibiting extraordinary talents to attract followers and alienate others is forbidden. Violating this rule is blameworthy. Therefore, anyone claiming to be a saint, possessing supernatural powers, extraordinary talents, should be recognized as going against the spirit of Buddhism. Buddhism teaches to practice more than to speak. Minimizing the use of miracles is crucial as it leads to personal idolatry and high superstition. Education is a miracle. The Buddha introduced a new concept based on wordplay. Educational miracles are considered the most valuable educational method that all educators and Buddhist preachers should practice. Educational miracles do not mean using one's supernatural powers to draw others into believing in supernatural, extraordinary abilities. Education, in this sense, is the ability to use methods to clearly see a person's strengths, weaknesses, dispositions, troubles, and potential to solve those troubles. By understanding the psychology and personality of that person, guiding them back to Buddhism can be highly effective. Those who can perform such educational work are considered to be performing miracles. In other words, the act of educating itself is a miracle. Transforming people from negative to positive, from suffering to happiness, from decline to vitality is a miracle. This type of education requires many different skills. Some people may achieve educational efficiency in a few days or months, but for others, it might take a lifetime to transform their subjects. Thus, education, especially moral and spiritual education, is a miracle. Therefore, Buddhist practitioners with the ability to perform the 6 supernatural powers rarely use them. In the Buddhist tradition, only Moggallana used his supernatural powers in very rare situations. Despite having the greatest supernatural abilities, surpassing many Brahmin spiritual leaders, he preferred teaching the Dharma to help people return to meaningful principles. This is something we need to consider. It may be arduous, but the value of successful transformation is long-lasting. Buddhist followers, however, often prefer the mystical or miraculous. They flock to places rumored to have miracles, like the belief that Lady Shu in Chodok can bestow peace and prosperity. Originally, there was only one annual day dedicated to Lady Shu, which later extended to a week, and now there are half-year-long seasons. Some temples even have names like Chodok 2 and Chodok 3 to offer equivalent value closer to home. This preference for supernatural aid reflects a reluctance to make efforts, desiring great results with little effort, hence the attraction to places promising much, rather than places speaking of cause and effect. Another understandable reason is that many people have exerted their utmost efforts without success, facing great pain and failure, leading to a loss of confidence in their abilities. Therefore, they are drawn to places rumored to offer miraculous aid. The miracle in Buddhism is the law of cause and effect. The ability to understand and live with cause and effect methodically, without falling into fatalism, randomness, blame, or complaints about heaven and earth, is the Buddhist method for resolving issues on a humanistic basis. The Buddha brought Upadasi back to the present and asked him to address current problems. The Buddha continued, "Upadasi, what I want to share with you is the doctrine of interconnection. The relationship is seen as a dialectic between objects, events, people, the environment, and animals with each other. If this exists, it creates a premise for the existence of something else. If this does not exist, it creates a premise for the absence of something else. Cause and effect are multidimensional, like spatial geometry, rather than merely linear. Linear cause and effect is naive, serving only to promote morality in a simplistic way. Killing a chicken means being reborn as a chicken and being killed, or stealing from others means being stolen from in this or the next life. Thinking this way undermines the concept of cause and effect. An analogy in the Samyutta Nikaya has deeper implications worth considering. The Buddha said, "If a prince and a commoner break the law, who will be punished more severely?" Clearly, the prince's crime might be covered up, dealt with internally, or even ignored, while the commoner's crime will be exposed and severely punished, possibly implicating their entire family. This makes people doubt the fairness of cause and effect. The Buddha further analyzed that individual merits tied to one's role and social status affect how they are treated. Therefore, co-offenders may face different punishments based on their merits. Societies not governed by rule of law but by favoritism will encourage more legal violations. When protections are gone, those individuals are often sacrificed in political purges. Hence, the connection of cause and effect should be understood as multidimensional. Good fortune can mitigate the consequences of bad actions, just as history of good deeds can lead to leniency. This merit can offset the negative actions we perform in the present. Such cause and effect are multidimensional, akin to spatial geometry. Indeed, the interaction of one thing leading to another is multidimensional and interactive. 26 centuries ago, such declarations were groundbreaking, as people believed that everything was predetermined by God or Brahma. In contrast, the Buddha explained it as a multidimensional interaction of objects, events, people, environment, and life, creating inevitable outcomes within themselves. No deity oversees and judges our actions, thoughts, and words, assigning us to specific rebirths. The Buddha said that this multidimensional interaction creates the effects we see. He refuted the idea that gods or deities control our destiny and emphasized that understanding this can free us from superstitions and unrealistic expectations about supernatural interventions. Dependent origination and interaction. The multidimensional interaction of cause and effect creates everything in life in a miraculous way, sometimes leading us to think that a supernatural hand must be at work. The question arises, if such supernatural power exists, who created it? There is no answer, leading to a dead end. Supernatural implies being uncreated and independent of causes. What is uncreated cannot be destroyed, meaning we create an absolute truth as the first cause of everything, which we consider inviolable and unquestionable. Such a response silences any debate. In reality, truth does not allow for such unquestioning acceptance. It permits us to trace origins through the formula of dependent origination. This exists because that exists. This arises because that arises. The rule of consequence is multidimensional interaction, meaning there is no single first cause. There are multiple causes: primary, secondary, direct, and indirect. This fundamental difference is what the Buddha wanted Upadasi and his followers to understand. Although the Sanas resisted the deterministic spirit of Brahmanism, they struggled to find satisfactory answers for causality and the perplexing differences in human conditions. They negated what they couldn't accept but failed to provide a more convincing alternative, leading to their impasse. The Buddha redirected Upadasi to focus on these foundational issues rather than debating past events or speculating about future scenarios that hold no practical value for the spiritual path toward happiness and peace. Upadasi confessed, "Master, I can hardly remember the generalities, let alone the details of yesterday, much less the events of one or multiple past lives. Thus, when you speak of the multi-dimensional interactive nature of causality, I find myself even more confused." This is a sincere and intellectually honest admission. Spiritual leaders are often adorned by followers with an aura of sanctity and deified in various ways, but here we see Upadasi's integrity. He does not want to accept the accolades bestowed upon him because they do not bring him peace or happiness. He wishes to live in the present, as invited by the Buddha, to forget the past and future. To engage in a dialogue about spirituality, ethics, happiness, and peace, and how to achieve them, they both delve into the present moment together. The willingness to shed the embellished aura and admit one's confusion opens the door for wisdom to arise. In dialogue, the correctness or victory is not as important as the opportunity to access or discover new truths. Upadasi exemplifies such a character, free from pride or sensitivity to perceived slights. Such attitudes would lead to the self-destruction of conscience and intellect. Thus, he admits that the issue raised by the Buddha is beyond his understanding and seeks to learn more from the Buddha on this topic. Between omniscience and dependent origination, it is clear that dependent origination holds more significance. Omniscience, as rumored, is tied to reverence and veneration imposed by others, offering no benefit to oneself. Even if true omniscience existed, the Buddha did not advise following it as a charlatan would. Those with deep spiritual insight do not need to boast. Their presence alone conveys their depth. Understanding dependent origination and the multidimensional nature of causality helps us resolve many personal, familial, communal, and global issues, even those spanning past, present, and future lives. Hence, understanding causality should be based on the present. The present should be the pivot, not the past. Today, many prosper by exploiting the past, with many professions rooted in it. For example, auctioning Picasso's paintings can make millions of dollars, even though Picasso himself lived in poverty, unappreciated during his life. After his death, his works were deified, and owning one is seen as a mark of intellectual sophistication. Although we do not deny the value of pioneering an impressive art style, it should not be exaggerated to the point where millions are spent on a single painting, while millions of people starve and suffer. Displaying such art for admiration reflects a valuation of past intellectual achievements. In contrast, the presence of the Buddha, as described in the scriptures, brought happiness to many, demonstrating practical, widespread value. Acknowledging our limitations and weaknesses allows us to develop strengths, whether in the present or the future. With the right methods and time. What is supreme? After analyzing the doctrine of dependent origination, the Buddha redirected the conversation to help Upadasi recognize the need to update his potential for wisdom. Otherwise, he would remain stuck in his current state. The Buddha asked, "Did your master teach you what is supreme in life? And if so, what is that object?" Upadasi replied, "My master says that form is supreme. When nothing else is supreme, it is supreme." Upadasi left it at that without further explanation. We can see that sometimes definitions can fall into a circular trap. A definition should add new understanding between the subject and the term, but often the terms are just synonymous, such as defining good as not bad and not bad as good, without providing any deeper insight. Many religions, philosophies, and even political ideologies offer attractive products, but their content can be empty. When asked to define the essence of these attractive products, people often avoid direct answers. They use appealing words to captivate the masses, while the actual content is inconsequential. The phrase, "you get what you pay for," is such an appealing term. A product's value is inflated tenfold, and the money spent must match this inflated value, even if the real value is much lower. The wealthy like to show off, so instead of a product worth $10,000, they will pay $100,000 and say, "You get what you pay for," ultimately being deceived. Understanding this issue helps us avoid chasing after mere appearances and names. In the Diamond Sutra, the Buddha declares a profound statement: all forms are illusory. This means all appearances, names, and even the flattering words about these forms are illusory, lacking real substance and value. However, society often values these forms, with 50 to 70% of a product's cost going to advertising, while its real value is only about 10%. Following the principle of appearances leads to money lost, trouble gained. We need concrete measures of value to discern whether something is real or just an empty declaration. Upadasi could not define what the supreme form was, so when asked further, he said that if nothing else was supreme, then that form was supreme. This creates a linguistic maze, trapping the interlocutor with no way out. Using undefined terms creates a cycle of confusion, forcing us to accept something that isn't clearly defined. In philosophical logic, such circular reasoning is forbidden because it leads nowhere. When we say that every religion teaches people to avoid evil and do good, the important issue is not the term, avoid evil and do good, but the content within this concept. If avoiding evil means simply not doing bad deeds, and doing good is merely not doing evil, then this concept is too shallow and lacks depth. We should not equate similar concepts in form and accept them as the same in content. The Vietnamese saying, "Sugarcane has bad segments, but the whole stalk is still sweet. A house may have leaks, but it's still a shelter," opposes this view. We shouldn't discard the entire cane because of a few bad segments, nor abandon the house due to a few leaks. Generalizing from a single instance to a universal rule is a methodological error to avoid. The Buddha gently said to Upadasi, "What you have just explained is meaningless. It does not help anyone understand." It is like saying, I am passionately in love with a beautiful woman, but when asked what makes her beautiful, whether it's her appearance, personality, or social role, you cannot answer. Saying someone is beautiful and that you love her without knowing anything about her is shallow. Such definitions do not lead us anywhere and show a superficial approach to understanding a person or issue. Idolizing someone without understanding the substance turns beliefs into blind faith, adding no value to real life. Upadasi used an analogy to prove that defining the supreme form as color, but his analogy backfired. The Buddha often said, "The wise understand through examples and comparisons," but Upadasi's analogy was counterproductive. The Buddha asked, "What is more brilliant, the color of a firefly or a jewel?" Upadasi said, "Of course, the jewel is more brilliant." The Buddha continued comparing different levels of brightness, leading Upadasi to acknowledge the superiority of each brighter object. Eventually, the comparison led to the sun at its zenith being the brightest. Then the Buddha compared the brightness of the sun to the light of human wisdom, asking which is brighter. Upadasi had no answer. In the context of the sutra, the Buddha used the term deva, which means shining ones. The caste system in India valued skin color, equating fair skin with wisdom and dark skin with inferiority, relegating darker-skinned people to menial labor. Instead of understanding this literally, the Buddha used it symbolically, defining brilliance as wisdom. Human wisdom shines boundlessly, unrestricted by time. A wise person illuminates their life and those around them, inviting others to share in the spiritual value. Thus, according to the Buddha, wisdom is supreme. It resolves all obstacles. A wise person, regardless of wealth, brings benefit and happiness through their actions, words, thoughts, and interactions. The essence of happiness. 5 ethical principles lead to happiness according to the Buddha's teachings and the viewpoint of asceticism. After Upadasi fell silent, unable to answer the question of whether the light of wisdom or the midday sun was brighter, the Buddha shifted the conversation to an important topic: the path to happiness. Wisdom should not be used only in the present to create happiness, which is a human desire. Happiness relates to the present, not to some distant realm after death. The Buddha asked Upadasi, "What is the only path that leads to happiness?" Upadasi replied, "My master taught that one must abstain from killing, not engage in theft, avoid adultery, refrain from lying, and practice asceticism." These 5 ethical principles were advocated by ascetics at the time. The first 4 ethical principles align with the Buddha's teachings in concept, but differ in content. Regarding abstaining from killing, the target of ascetic teachings was human beings, not encompassing the broader and more positive meaning of promoting and building peace. Some animals can engage in instinctual wars, but these wars are for survival and resources, unlike the calculated wars humans wage that can annihilate entire species. International or ideological wars often stem from disrespecting sovereignty and related issues. Therefore, the Buddha taught that alongside maintaining ethical conduct, one must build peace. In addition to abstaining from killing, one should practice freeing and creating life and harmoniously building the environment. Second, besides not stealing, one should practice charity, generosity, and helping others. Not stealing should be coupled with charitable actions. Third, not only should one uphold monogamy, but also encourage others to do the same and create opportunities for such conduct to flourish. Fourth, alongside not lying, one should practice proclaiming the truth, speaking words that rebuild harmony from destruction, and saying things beneficial to society and the community. We can see that the content far exceeds the basic moral principles. These 4 ethical principles align in identifying what is evil, but differ significantly in promoting and guiding toward what is good. Other religious and ethical teachings do not emphasize this construction of good as much. The 5th difference is that asceticism as a path to ultimate happiness is not endorsed by the Buddha. The Buddha, having been a victim of this practice, did not rush to analyze this for Upadasi. The Buddha continued, "Can practicing these 5 ethical principles lead to genuine happiness, or is it a mix of suffering and joy?" After some thought, Upadasi replied, "I believe it is not pure happiness but a mixture of suffering and joy." This is a very accurate observation. By not committing the four evil deeds of killing, stealing, adultery, and lying, we naturally feel joy from not being punished by the law, cursed, or tormented by our conscience. This joy is natural, but we must consider the fifth principle, asceticism. Indeed, having full faculties but not enjoying them positively, ethically, and for mutual joy renders them pointless. Ascetics experience suffering but console themselves that enduring this suffering will bring eternal happiness, which is a flawed understanding of karma. The profound lesson is that the Buddha suggests we must think for ourselves to arrive at the truth. If the Buddha outright declared this method wrong, Upadasi might not believe him. Therefore, he led Upadasi to his own conclusions. Only when we earnestly and honestly reflect on knowledge can we truly awaken, being reborn with wisdom. The Buddha stated that the true path to happiness does not end with avoiding evil, but must also include sowing seeds of goodness. Several discourses in the middle-length discourses describe the path to happiness in Buddhism as having three aspects: completely avoiding evil, absolutely building goodness, and purifying the mind through training one's motives and attitudes when practicing goodness. If good deeds are done with the motive of seeking fame or out of obligation, the heart is not noble. Even if the good deed is accomplished, its social value remains low. The ascetic path only achieves the first aspect of avoiding evil, but does not address doing good. They perceive doing good as self-mortification, thus failing to purify the mind. When the mind suffers because of bodily suffering, how can one find joy? This spiritual method is entirely ineffective. The path to happiness. The Buddha said, the reasonable path leading to happiness is the first, second, and third jhanas. Here, the Buddha used the relative term, reasonable path, rather than saying that practicing the first, second, and third jhanas is equivalent to and identical with happiness. Recently, a Buddhist shared with us that she had been possessed by a spirit for nearly 20 years. She believed it was a benevolent spirit that could bring her happiness, so she accepted its presence for decades. It instructed her to chant sutras, meditate, and stop at its command. We asked, if it is a benevolent spirit, why did it tell you to stop chanting and meditating? She replied, because during conversations the spirit said, as long as you meditate, chant sutras, and practice, you are still disturbed. You must practice to the point of no thoughts, no practice, no attainment. This frightened her into abandoning everything. The spiritual nourishment she received daily for happiness was discarded due to an imagined illness directed by a spirit. It took us nearly 2 hours to help her realize she was in a delusional state. Therefore, the Buddha spoke very relatively, and this relativity is the truth. Because the nature of the universe is dependent origination, everything is relative. Hence, the Buddha used the phrase, this may be a reasonable path. Reasonable and leading to are two conditions. First, it must align with the truth as it unfolds. Second, it must have the potential to lead there. If these two factors are not fulfilled, then even if we practice, we will not achieve results. Thus, method and condition cannot be separated. The outcome of any practice must depend on the method. Without method, even if we are in a temple for decades, we remain stagnant, or worse, our ego grows. Without wisdom, the ego grows rapidly. The more achievements, the larger the ego. The first jhana is the detachment from sensual pleasures and unwholesome states. Sensual pleasure, particularly sexual desire and simple physical desires, foster greed and ignorance. Wherever there is desire, there is ignorance, conservatism, and usurpation leading to anger. When greed, anger, and ignorance coexist, suffering arises. Unwholesome states include actions, speech, and thoughts. To attain the first jhana, a practitioner must first cease evil, do good, and transform sexual energy. The second jhana is the cessation of applied and sustained thought. This involves using a wholesome object as a focus for the mind to temporarily forget worries, overcome pain, and not cling to negative things, aiming towards a positive spiritual path. This is a necessary reaction, a substitution method, like a wedge to stabilize the mind, calming it, making it light and relaxed. This process of bliss occurs as we practice with a single object. In Buddhist scriptures, many objects can be relied upon, such as loving kindness, compassion, joy, equanimity, non-greed, non-anger, non-ignorance, essentially ethical values for contemplation, helping to overcome sorrow. Alternatively, one can rely on the light, space, or elements like earth, water, fire, and wind. Whatever suits one's preference and ability becomes a tool and condition to achieve stillness, overcoming pain. Using this formula, Chinese Zen masters created koans after transformative enlightenment for a student, which were then applied to various situations with similar results. Initial dialogues without historical basis were used according to the tendencies and capabilities of the Zen masters to help students break their attachments. If a koan proves highly effective and widely used, it becomes an established koan. Thus, all initial dialogues are the beginning of a koan, and koans or initial dialogues are just tools of applied and sustained thought, focusing on a particular object. Breathing, smiling, contemplating the name of Buddha Amitabha, or chanting mantras in Vajrayana have similar values. These act as wedges to stabilize the mind, preventing disturbances and illusions. With this practice, the practitioner progresses from the first jhana to the second. The definition of the second jhana is the cessation of applied and sustained thought as tools, meaning after successfully borrowing them, we must discard them. Like scaffolding for a two-story house, once the house is built, the scaffolding must be removed. Tools need to be transcended. The methods used must be let go. The Diamond Sutra states, even the correct teaching must be abandoned, let alone incorrect teachings. Incorrect teachings include wrong, unwholesome, unethical, contentious, and more, which should naturally be abandoned. The correct teachings also need to be abandoned, which can be puzzling if not understood in context. Using the correct teachings as a raft to cross a river becomes pointless if carried on the head out of gratitude. It must be let go after crossing. One should let go of methods, returning them to the suffering side for others to use. Clinging to them shows a lack of intellectual generosity. Chinese people often fall into this intellectual stinginess. Family inheritance of knowledge is a form of this stinginess. Therefore, applied and sustained thoughts as tools for establishing peace of mind must be abandoned to reside in the second jhana. The third jhana is the abandonment of initial joy and subtle bliss. We must let go of the initial joy, though it starts as light and comfortable in the first and second jhanas. Only then can we achieve subtle bliss, akin to ascending to the third floor and turning away from the first and second floors. Letting go of the lower joys enables reaching higher jhanas. Here, the Buddha modestly and relatively states, these may be reasonable paths leading to happiness. The fourth jhana, equanimity and purity of mindfulness, is the core goal the Buddha aimed for. The Buddha asked the ascetics and followers of Upadasi present, "Do you have any opinions?" They unanimously responded, "We know nothing beyond what our master present here has taught, and what he says represents our thoughts." Monotheistic religious paths often reflect this. The student's knowledge is a copy of the teacher's, without daring to question anything, even methodically or rationally. They rarely invent anything new. The Buddha turned to Upadasi, who shook his head and asked, "What then is the path to true happiness if you say the first, second, and third jhanas are just reasonable methods?" The Buddha replied, "One must dwell in the fourth jhana. Achieving this and living among those who have attained it brings true happiness. The third jhana, subtle bliss, is not the highest happiness because it exists only during meditation. The formula of the fourth jhana has two parts: equanimity and purity of mindfulness. Equanimity means letting go of the objects of happiness and suffering, or being neutral between them. In meditation, holding on to happiness and letting go of suffering is necessary. Without holding on to happiness, suffering cannot be let go. But it is a mistake to hold on to happiness after letting go of suffering, as this is conditional happiness, opposing suffering, not true happiness. Therefore, we must let go of thoughts, as attachment hinders progress. When attachment ceases, absolute purity of mind is achieved. The mind transforms into wisdom, shedding all attachments, allowing one to master emotions, perceptions, and self. The Buddha taught, when one lets go of thoughts and attains purity, it exists not only during meditation but everywhere, highlighting this goal. Reaching the fourth jhana with equanimity and purity means living in true happiness, not merely experiencing an illusion of happiness. Like a banker counting money is experiencing the illusion of wealth, or one hearing descriptions of food but not actually eating, the person gains no real satisfaction. The Buddha shared with Upadasi that achieving the fourth jhana is great happiness for lay people. But he affirmed true monastics on the Buddhist spiritual path do not aim just to attain the fourth jhana, but have higher goals. The Buddha clearly outlined these goals: recollection of past lives, understanding of birth and death, and the destruction of mental defilements. These three are known as the threefold knowledge. Recollection of past lives is the wisdom of past experiences, providing empirical evidence and lessons for the present and future to avoid repeating mistakes. It opens the door to non-errancy and repentance. The divine eye is the wisdom to see others' karma, reaffirming the deeper understanding of future karma. While personal karma is known through recollection of past lives, others' future karma is seen through the divine eye. Thus, possessing these two wisdoms provides complete knowledge of personal and others' karma. The destruction of mental defilements is the wisdom to see clearly that defilements, karmic obstacles, and impurities like greed, anger, ignorance, and selfish ego have no place. This is the ultimate result for a spiritual practitioner in Buddhism. These three goals are why people become monks, not for reverence, praise, or positions in a temple or religious community. Achieving the threefold knowledge leads to the wisdom of the Four Noble Truths, liberating from the floods of sensual desire, rebirth, and ignorance. The Buddha used the impactful metaphor of a flood to convey the overwhelming nature of these defilements. Therefore, the fundamental and most crucial goal for Buddhist practitioners is to attain the threefold knowledge to end all life's suffering. Moreover, post-attainment conduct is based on the wisdom of the Four Noble Truths, ensuring no errors or repetitions in actions. Obstacles and realities. After listening to the Buddha's teachings, the spiritual teacher Upadasi felt admiration for the insights he had heard for the first time. Being an honest seeker of true spiritual knowledge, he objectively assessed the teachings without letting past prejudices influence him. Thus, he wished to become a disciple of the Buddha and sought to become a genuine monk. According to tradition, anyone who had been a priest of another religion had to undergo a period of faith-testing practice. But in this case, the Buddha immediately accepted Upadasi, knowing that he approached Buddhism with a sincere quest for truth and not for illusionary fame or status. When the Buddha accepted Upadasi as a monastic disciple, his ascetic and lay disciples were furious. They said, "Venerable Upadasi is like a pierced water jar that cannot hold a single drop of water. He is the empty one, not our teacher." Hearing such strong opposition, Upadasi lost the opportunity to become a monastic disciple of the Buddha, even though the Buddha was ready to accept him. Limited by their understanding and knowledge, sometimes our loved ones, out of affection and the desire to protect us, end up harming us by preventing us from accessing higher values because they fear losing us. Upadasi had hundreds of thousands of disciples, yet he felt no shame in acknowledging the Buddha as his teacher, recognizing the Buddha's true spiritual nature. He also wished for his disciples to follow the Buddha. However, their strong reaction caused him to waver. Ultimately, he lived with the truth but did not become a part of it, maintaining his old spiritual tradition despite having been enlightened. Living with loved ones like Upadasi's disciples can cause suffering. Out of love, they protect us, fearing to lose us. Relationships built on gain and loss bind people together, leading to a situation where the blind lead the blind. It's like not knowing how to row a boat. The more you struggle, the more the boat stays in place or goes in circles, resulting in no progress despite the effort. Many questions arise during retreats. I want to go to the temple, but my spouse doesn't agree because they fear losing me. Another scenario, I want to do charity, but my husband and father don't allow it, saying it's foolish and encourages laziness in others. This reasoning, though seemingly appealing, is misplaced. While some may exploit charity, others might need timely support to avoid despair and death caused by natural disasters. In impermanence, love remains. When everything else is lost, love is established. Natural disasters like tsunamis and earthquakes teach us love amidst collective mourning, often unacknowledged. Such tragedies provide opportunities to strengthen love, not as a result of praying for misfortune, but as a natural response. If we don't know how to love correctly, we may hinder our loved ones' happiness and joy. Visiting temples and practicing good deeds should not be feared. Excessive worry can unintentionally imprison our loved ones in emotional shackles. When seeing loved ones engaging in good deeds, some people lament, "Oh no, she's being so foolish, giving all her money away." Such negative thinking and comments create fear and prevent commitment. Or one might hear, "Practicing for merits is ordinary. True practice is about non-practice, non-attainment, and non-thought." Without achieving preliminary merits in practice, how can one attain non-attainment? Practice diligently first, then discard past achievements to attain the ultimate goal. Ambition for non-attachment without prior accomplishments is futile. Huineng's verses in the Platform Sutra can be a double-edged sword, leading to confusion if misapplied. Bodhi is fundamentally without any tree. The bright mirror is also not a stand. Originally, there is not a single thing where can dust alight. Such teachings are for those with significant spiritual attainment. For those on the path, effort and achievements are necessary before discarding them for ultimate realization. Shen Shu's verses are for beginners, while Huineng's are for advanced practitioners. Using Huineng's teaching prematurely results in no merits, as nothing is done to generate them. Therefore, applying sutra teachings appropriately is crucial. Overusing spiritual intensity is like overdosing on medicine, ineffective after overuse. Similarly, spirituality should match one's capacity to avoid hindering growth. Loving and guiding loved ones correctly helps them achieve their worth. Misguided protection, like Upadasi's disciples, can lead to their downfall. Many face such situations in society. It's regrettable when a knowledgeable and honest spiritual teacher like Upadasi is swayed. Though not mentioned in the scriptures, there might be some regret in his thoughts. Being a teacher to many, now becoming a disciple seems wasteful. In reality, Upadasi lived the Buddha's new spiritual path, but couldn't openly admit it, hindered by his followers' opinions, leading to internal conflict and missed opportunities. 30 Zen stories to help you perfect yourself and change your destiny. Welcome back, everyone, to Mind Podcast. Reading and enjoying these small classic Zen stories will help you grasp the unique allure of Zen thought in a natural and comfortable way. You'll understand that although Zen is profound, its form is exceedingly simple and lively, touching the heart without the need for words. Each story in this book fully embodies the wisdom of Zen masters and Buddhist scriptures, containing countless genuine meanings of life, making it an excellent book for life enlightenment. 1. Eating honey to repent. When Zen master Ikkyu was still a young novice, he already had a Zen demeanor. One day, a disciple gave his master a jar of honey. The master, planning to go out, thought, leaving this honey in the room is unsafe, Ikkyu might eat it. So he called Ikkyu over and instructed, "Ikkyu, a disciple just gave us this jar of poison. It's very potent and extremely dangerous, so don't eat it out of greed." Ikkyu was very intelligent and understood his master's hint. After the master left, Ikkyu drank all the honey. After finishing it, he wondered how to face his master upon his return. With quick thinking, he conveniently broke his master's favorite vase. When the master returned, Ikkyu pretended to cry loudly on the floor, saying, "Master, I have committed an unforgivable sin." "Ikkyu, what did you do wrong?" "Master, I broke your favorite vase." "Ikkyu, how could you be so careless and break such a precious vase?" Ikkyu, feigning deep remorse, said, "Master, I knew I shouldn't have broken your vase, so to repent, I decided to take my own life. That's why I drank the poison." This kind of repentance left the master in a bittersweet dilemma, both laughing and crying at once. Zen wisdom. Zen principles, when applied to spiritual cultivation, can indeed illuminate and reveal the true nature of the mind. When applied to daily life, they also hold miraculous benefits. Zen is wisdom, the wisdom of prajna, and the wisdom of humor. Ikkyu, even as a child, was so quick-witted, using such a method to repent. Isn't this the humor in Zen principles? 2. Clearing the clouds to see the sky. A devotee asked Zen master Buddha Guang, "The sutras say that worshipping 100,000 Buddhas is not as good as worshipping one selfless practitioner. What fault do the 100,000 Buddhas have? And what virtue does the selfless practitioner possess?" Zen master Dao Guang answered with a verse, "A piece of white cloud stretches across the valley. How many returning birds lose their nests?" This means that because of an additional cloud, birds returning to their nests get lost and cannot find their way home. By worshipping Buddhas, you focus on external objects, thereby losing yourself. By worshipping a selfless practitioner, you transcend all distinctions. Although the 100,000 Buddhas have no faults, the selfless practitioner can help you recognize yourself. The devotee then asked, "Why do we still use wooden fish and drums in a pure Buddha hall?" Zen Master Dao Guang replied with another verse, "When striking the wooden fish and beating the drum, it reaches beyond the clouds to the stars." This means that the pure Buddha hall needs to use the wooden fish and the drum with no ulterior motives. The wooden fish, which never closes its eyes, symbolizes diligence and perseverance. The drum is beaten to remove karma and increase blessings. The sounds of the wooden fish and drum reach beyond the clouds, transcending the sufferings of reincarnation. The devotee further asked, "If one can practice Buddhism at home, why must one become a monk?" Zen Master Dao Guang replied, "The peacock, though beautiful, can't fly as high as the swan." This implies that while practicing Buddhism at home is good, it cannot compare to the focused and dedicated practice of a monk. The peacock's colorful feathers cannot help it fly higher than the swan. The clouds in the devotee's mind were finally cleared by Zen Master Dao Guang. Some questions, when unresolved, can feel like a tangled mess, but once explained, it's like clearing the clouds to see the blue sky. 3. The length of life. One day, as the Buddha awaited his disciples' return from alms, he asked, "Disciples, you've been busy collecting alms today. What is the purpose of it?" The disciples respectfully replied, "Buddha, we seek to nourish our bodies to maintain our physical form and achieve purity and liberation in life." The Buddha looked at them with serene eyes and asked, "So how long do you think the lifespan of the physical body is?" "Buddha, sentient beings generally live for several decades," confidently answered one disciple. The Buddha shook his head, saying, "You do not understand the true nature of life." Another disciple then said solemnly, "Human life is like flowers and grass. In spring, they bloom brilliantly, but in winter they wither and turn to dust." The Buddha smiled approvingly and said, "You understand the impermanence of life, but your understanding of the Dharma is still superficial." Another voice, filled with sorrow, said, "Buddha, life feels as fleeting as an insect that lives from morning to evening, lasting no more than a single day." Yes, you observe the brevity of life, moving closer to understanding the essence of the Dharma, but there's still more to grasp. As the Buddha's denials and hints continued, the disciples' intuition was increasingly stimulated. Then another disciple declared, "Buddha, our lives are like morning dew, appearing beautiful but vanishing in an instant under the sun's rays." The Buddha silently smiled. The disciples discussed the length of life with even more fervor. Then one disciple stood up and proclaimed, "Buddha, I believe that human life is but a single breath." This statement astonished everyone, and they all looked to the Buddha for enlightenment. Yes, that's correct. Remember, disciples, not to be lazy or complacent, thinking life is long. Life is like a drop of dew, a fleeting moment, like flowers and grass that last a season, like humans who live for several decades. Life is but a breath in and out. Seize every moment of life, strive ceaselessly, and advance courageously. The length of life is just a breath in and out. Only by understanding this can one truly grasp the essence of life. For like water to water, Zen Master Xuanxia met Zen Master Xuefeng on the road. Xuefeng said, "A monk from afar passed away last night, and I feel deep sorrow. This reminds me of a question someone asked me a few days ago." Xuanxia asked, "What was the question?" Xuefeng replied, "They asked me what happens after a person dies." Xuanxia inquired, "How did you answer?" Xuefeng said, "I told him, after death, it's like ice returning to water." Xuanxia turned to the dark night sky and slowly said, "Yes, that makes sense, but I don't fully agree. Nonetheless, your answer has inspired me." Xuefeng asked, "How would you answer?" Xuanxia bowed his head and clasped his hands, saying, "After death, it's like water returning to water." Xuefeng was deeply impressed. The next day, a monk asked Xuanxia, "What is my true life?" Xuanxia coldly replied, "What do you want your true life to be?" Life is about wanting and losing, gaining and losing. Fear of death is life. Hating life is transcending death. In the sea of humanity, one doesn't notice the pebbles ahead. Zen is not mystical. It is a way of life that can awaken our intuition, nourish the blossoming of life, give us smiles and joy, and help us find our true value. 5. The Beautiful Temple. Buddha was very skilled at explaining Zen principles to his disciples through stories, and the disciples never tired of listening. One day, Buddha told the disciples a story. A king wanted to renovate a temple in the capital. He sent out for highly skilled designers, hoping they could beautify and dignify the temple. 2 groups of workers were summoned. One group of famous carpenters and painters, and the other group of monks. Since the king was unsure whose skills were superior, he decided to give them an equal chance to compete. He asked each group to refurbish a small temple located opposite each other. After 3 days, the king would come to inspect the results. The carpenters requested over 100 different kinds of paint in various colors and many tools, while the monks surprisingly only needed a few simple clean tools like cloths and water buckets. After 3 days, the king came to inspect the results. First, he viewed the temple refurbished by the carpenters. They celebrated the completion of their work with drums and gongs, showcasing their craftsmanship with intricate art and vibrant colors. The king nodded with satisfaction. Next, the king turned to inspect the temple renovated by the monks. To his astonishment, the monks had not painted any colors at all. They had merely cleaned the walls, furniture, windows, and all the items in the temple, revealing their natural colors polished to a shine like mirrors. The vivid colors of the clouds in the sky, the swaying tree shadows in the wind, and even the colorful temple opposite became part of the beautiful scenery reflected in this temple. Its beauty lay in simply being a peaceful receiver of all these elements. Zen wisdom. Our hearts are like a temple. They do not need to be adorned with intricate decorations. It is enough to cleanse the heart, allowing its inherent beauty to shine forth. 6. Time does not age. The disciple Daichi, a student of Zen master Buddha Guang, returned after studying for 20 years and shared his experiences and knowledge with Buddha Guang. Buddha Guang listened with a faint smile. Finally, Daichi asked, "Master, have you been well these past 20 years?" Buddha Guang replied, "Very well. I have been lecturing, teaching Dharma, annotating sutras, writing scriptures, and traveling through the ocean of Dharma. There is no life more joyous than this. I am joyfully busy every day." Daichi with concern said, "Master, you should rest more." Late at night, Buddha Guang told Daichi, "Go rest now. We can talk more later." The next morning, Daichi heard the sound of the wooden fish and chanting from Buddha Guang's room. Buddha Guang was tirelessly instructing waves of devotees coming to worship, explaining the Dharma. In the meditation hall, if there were no students reporting their insights, he prepared materials for the followers. He was always busy. Daichi rarely found a moment when Buddha Guang was not engaged. Seizing a free moment, Daichi asked, "Master, we have been apart for 20 years. You are still so busy every day, yet you don't seem to age. How is that?" Buddha Guang responded, "I do not feel the passing of time." Zen wisdom. Not feeling the passage of time essentially means there is no concept of aging in the heart. Confucius said, "The noble person is so engaged in their pursuit that they forget about eating, so joyful that they forget their worries, and do not realize that old age is approaching." 7. The first in tea ceremony. Sen no Rikyu is the founder of the Japanese tea ceremony and was a distinguished disciple of the famous Zen master Ikkyu. He held an extremely prestigious position in Japanese society. Once a man named Uji Rinjoan invited Sen no Rikyu to his tea ceremony. Rikyu accepted the invitation and brought several disciples along. Rinjoan was overjoyed yet very nervous. As he served tea to everyone, his hands trembled, causing the teaspoon to fall and the teapot to spill, making a mess. Rikyu's disciples snickered secretly. However, when the ceremony ended, Rikyu praised, "Today's tea ceremony by the host was the best in the world." His disciples, finding Rikyu's words unbelievable, asked him on the way back, "The tea ceremony was so clumsy. How could it be the best in the world?" Rikyu replied, "Rinjoan wanted us to enjoy the best tea, focusing wholeheartedly on making it. Because of this, he did not mind the mishap." This sincerity is what matters most. In the tea ceremony, sincerity is paramount. Regardless of how beautiful the tea setup is or how luxurious the tea utensils are, without genuine intention, it is meaningless. Zen wisdom. In the natural world, small seeds like peaches and pears can grow into vast trees bearing countless fruits. Likewise, inner sincerity manifests clearly in transforming small gestures into great deeds. Therefore, in cultivation, sincerity is essential. 8. The swordsmanship must be decisive. In modern Japan, there were two top swordsmen, Miyamoto Musashi and Yagyu Jubei. Musashi was Jubei's master. When Jubei asked Musashi how long it would take to become a master swordsman, the following dialogue ensued. "Master, how long will it take me to become a master if I strive hard?" Jubei asked. "A lifetime," Musashi replied. "I can't wait that long. If I work very hard, how long will it take?" Jubei persisted. 10 years, maybe. But my father is getting older, and I must serve him soon. What if I train even harder? Jubei asked. Then it will take 30 years, Musashi answered. Why is it that the more effort I put in, the longer it takes? Jubei wondered. People like you who are impatient and seek quick results never succeed, Musashi explained. Jubei understood the principle and decided to stay and learn from Musashi. Musashi taught Jubei not by discussing swordsmanship, but by having him do chores like cooking, washing, and cleaning without mentioning the sword. 3 years passed, and Jubei continued to do these chores, feeling uncertain about his future. One day, Musashi struck him from behind with a wooden stick. The next day, while Jubei was cooking, Musashi struck him again. From then on, Jubei stayed on guard, ready to defend against sudden attacks. Gradually, he reached a higher state of awareness, and Musashi was satisfied. Eventually, Jubei became the most renowned swordsman in Japan. Zen wisdom. Zen involves transcending external forms and seeking absolute liberation, a fundamental aspect of Zen practice. Embrace tasks without force or obsession, and great achievements will come naturally. 9. Knowing when to let go. When Zen Master Huiyuan was young, he enjoyed traveling to various places. Once, he met a man on the road who loved smoking. They traveled a long way together through the mountains and eventually rested by a river. The man offered Zen Master Huiyuan a bag of tobacco. Huiyuan gladly accepted the gift, and as they talked, finding great harmony in their conversation, the man also gave him a pipe and some more tobacco. After parting ways, Huiyuan thought to himself, "This thing makes people feel very comfortable, but it will disturb my meditation. Over time, it will be hard to quit this habit, so it's better to stop early." Thus, he threw away both the pipe and the tobacco. A few years passed, and Huiyuan became fascinated by the I Ching. It was winter, and the weather was freezing. He wrote a letter to his teacher, asking for some cotton-padded clothes. However, the letter took a long time, and winter passed. The snow on the mountain began to melt, yet the clothes never arrived, nor did he hear back from the messenger. Huiyuan then used the I Ching to divine the situation and found that the letter had not reached his teacher. He thought, "The I Ching may be accurate, but if I become engrossed in this, how can I fully devote myself to Zen practice?" From then on, he no longer engaged with the I Ching. Later, Huiyuan became obsessed with calligraphy, practicing daily and achieving some minor success. Some calligraphers praised him highly. However, he realized, "I am straying from my path again. If I continue this way, I will become a calligrapher instead of a Zen master." So, he devoted himself fully to Zen practice, discarding everything unrelated to Zen, eventually becoming a great master in the Zen tradition. Zen wisdom. Understanding one's goal is certainly precious, but even more precious is the spirit of tireless perseverance towards that goal. Additionally, recognizing when one has deviated from the goal and correcting course immediately is crucial. 10. Sincerity without deceit. During the Song dynasty, there was a Zen master named Dao Kai, who practiced for many years and upon attaining enlightenment, began traveling to spread Zen principles to the public. Zen master Dao Kai traveled to many places and served as the abbot of several temples, including Jingren Temple and Tianning Temple. His reputation reached the emperor, who greatly admired his work and decided to bestow upon him a robe to honor his virtuous efforts in promoting Buddhism, along with the title of Master Ding Zhao. Upon hearing this news, Zen Master Dao Kai surprisingly and firmly refused to accept these honors. The emperor then sent Li Shaoshou from Kaifeng Prefecture to personally deliver the emperor's goodwill message to Dao Kai. However, the Zen master still refused to accept the honors. Frustrated by Dao Kai's repeated cold rejections, The emperor ordered the local officials to arrest him, hoping punishment would change his mind. The local official, who had previously heard Dao Kai preach, deeply understood the master's honest and loyal nature. When he arrived at the temple, he dismissed his subordinates and spoke softly to Dao Kai. "Master, you look very weak and pale. Are you ill?" Dao Kai shook his head and said, "No." Seeing that his hints were not working, the official directly said, "Master, if you claim to be ill, the emperor will surely excuse your previous hardships of traveling and teaching." Still, Dao Kai shook his head, calmly replying, "If I am not ill, I cannot pretend to be ill just to avoid punishment." The official, moved and exasperated, had no choice but to reluctantly escort the Zen master to Sisho. Zen wisdom: sincerity without deceit, not pretending, keeping promises, and practically seeking progress. Sincerity is a fortress of character. 11. Uninfluenced by conflict. An old monk was teaching a young novice how to preserve shiitake mushrooms. The old monk instructed the novice to wrap each mushroom carefully in plastic bags. The novice thought it was a tedious process but followed the instructions. In the fall, the monk asked the novice to retrieve the stored mushrooms to eat. The novice hurried to get them and soon returned, saying, "Master, the mushrooms have all rotted and are inedible." The master calmly said, "Open some other bags and check." The novice did as told and came back smiling. "Only one mushroom in this basket is spoiled. The rest are perfectly fine and edible." The master used this to teach the novice, life is like a basket of mushrooms. If you carefully wrap each conflict like wrapping mushrooms in plastic bags, isolated failures and setbacks won't affect the larger success. Most of the mushrooms in the basket are still good and edible. Thus, Zen teaches that partial failures are inevitable, but one must trust that future success will come and not be discouraged by minor mistakes. Zen wisdom: conflict is inevitable in all things, but how to manage it is crucial. Facing all opposites with a calm heart ensures one is not affected by fear of conflict. 12. No work, no eat. Zen master Baizhang Huaihai from the Tang dynasty once said, "If you do not work, how can you eat? A day without work is a day without food." This spirit has become a model for monasteries for thousands of years. After succeeding Zen master Mazu Daoyi, the founder of the monastery system, Baizhang established a series of systematic rules, such as the monastic rules of Baizhang and the monastic pure rules, which provided a framework for monastery life. Baizhang advocated for the Zen agricultural life. A day without work is a day without food. He faced many challenges because traditional Buddhism relied on precepts for livelihood, whereas Baizhang changed this by promoting agricultural Zen for self-sufficiency. Some even criticized him as a heretic. Baizhang lived at the peak of Baizhang Mountain, hence the name. Every day, besides leading the monks in practice, he personally engaged in labor-intensive work, ensuring self-sufficiency in daily life. Despite his advanced age, he continued to carry firewood up the mountain and plant crops in the fields, embodying the spirit of agricultural Zen. His disciples, out of concern for their aging master, pleaded with him not to undertake heavy labor, but Baizhang insisted, saying, "I am an undeserving worker. If people do not work, won't they become useless?" The disciples, unable to stop him, hid his tools, but Baizhang resorted to fasting in protest. His disciples anxiously asked, "Why don't you eat or drink?" He replied, "A day without work is a day without food." The disciples reluctantly returned his tools, allowing him to work freely. Baizhang's principle of self-sufficiency not only followed the life of a day without work is a day without food, but also called for the spirit of carrying water and firewood is also Zen. Regardless of chanting or practicing Zen, the true essence of practice is not an excuse for laziness. Work is the foundation of all activities, embodying the spirit of no work, no eat. Zen wisdom. Some believe that practicing Zen requires complete isolation from worldly affairs, not even engaging in work, just chanting. In reality, not working and disconnecting from life are not true Zen. 13. Calming the storm. A Zen master was traveling and encountered someone who disliked him. For several days, this person used various methods to insult the master. Finally, the master turned around and asked, "If someone offers you a gift, but you refuse to accept it, to whom does the gift belong?" The person replied, "It belongs to the person who offered the gift." The master smiled and said, "That's right. If I do not accept your insults, then you are insulting yourself. The sixth patriarch said that people have six senses and that we live with them, and we cannot sever these six senses. We cannot sever the relationship between our senses and their objects. Thus, we must determine not to let our minds be contaminated by the myriad external scenes and not be influenced by what is outside our sensory perceptions to achieve the true nature of constant freedom. Zen wisdom. Just as the Master said, if the mind is not disturbed by others, using stillness to control movement and calmness to counteract evil, one will not suffer and be swayed by any external intrusion. The Snow Peak and the Undelivered Letter. Snow Peak Temple on Mount Siming in Ningbo, Zhejiang, has produced many eminent monks over the generations, all taking the name Snow Peak. However, in Zen records, the Snow Peak Zen Master refers specifically to Zen Master Snow Peak Chomshin of the authentic lineage. Zen Master Snow Peak had a compassionate heart, tirelessly spreading the meaning of the Buddhist teachings, helping people understand the essence of life. He established a unique and new style in the Zen forest. Scholars and monks from all over competed to study and prove themselves. After arriving at Snow Peak Temple, he adorned the Buddha land, turning it into a new ancestral hall of the Yunmen Zen tradition. At that time, other Zen schools were declining, but only the Yunmen school thrived. Hence it was called the Revival of Yunmen. Initially, Zen Master Snow Peak met the magistrate Zheng Hui by the Huai River. Zheng Hui asked, "Zen Master, where are you going?" Snow Peak politely replied, "Maybe to Chentan or to see the Zen platform." Zheng Hui suggested, "The abbot of Lingyan Temple, Zen Master San, is very kind to me. I will write you a letter of introduction. He will surely treat you well." But when Zen Master Snow Peak arrived at Lingyan Temple, he did not present the letter of introduction to the abbot. Instead, he stayed with the others for 3 years. 3 years later, Zheng Hui, on an assignment to Zhejiang, visited Lingyan Temple to find Snow Peak, but none of the monks knew of him. Zheng Hui didn't believe it and personally searched the monks' quarters, eventually finding Snow Peak. He asked, "Why didn't you go to see the abbot? Did you lose my letter of introduction?" Snow Peak replied, "No, but I am a Snow River monk, seeking nothing, so I could not be your letter carrier." He then handed back the untouched letter to Zheng Hui, and they laughed heartily. Zheng Hui took Snow Peak to meet Abbot San, who appreciated his talent. Later, when Kuifeng Temple in Suzhou needed an abbot, Snow Peak was recommended for the position. Zen wisdom. Seeking nothing, one's virtue stands tall. Seeking help from others cannot compare to relying on oneself. As long as one strives with effort, there is no fear that one's talents will go unnoticed. Efforts will eventually be rewarded. 15. The Dai House and Genuine Love. Zen masters often tell unexpected stories, and there is a classic love story in the Zen records of Japan. During the Edo period in Japan, the profession of courtesans was prevalent. These courtesans were meticulously selected for their beauty and intelligence. They were well versed in music, chess, calligraphy, painting, psychology, and romance, primarily engaging with officials and aristocrats, holding high social status. The most outstanding among them were called Taiyu, who could only associate with lords and wealthy merchants. At that time, the most famous Taiyu was Kawai. She had great influence and usually entertained only feudal lords or wealthy merchants, each engagement costing 15 pieces of gold. A dyer named Lao Ju greatly admired Taiyu Kawai. However, due to his status, he could not approach her. What should he do? Eventually, he thought of a way. He saved every penny for 3 years, working hard to accumulate 15 pieces of gold. He then falsely claimed to be a wealthy merchant from Osaka, seeking to meet Taiyu Kawai. To his delight, he succeeded. Lao Ju finally met the person he longed for day and night, Taiyu Kawai. Upon parting, Taiyu Kawai said to him, "Please come again." Others would usually say, "I will come again," but Lao Ju sincerely replied, "It will take me another 3 years to return." Taiyu Kawai was deeply moved. After some questioning, she learned that he had worked hard for 3 years just to meet her. "When I gain my freedom, I will marry you. To show my sincerity, I give you these 300 pieces of gold I have saved," Kawai told Lao Ju. Eventually, Taiyu Kawai gained her freedom and married Lao Ju. The couple worked together, establishing the #1 Dai house in Edo. Zen wisdom. Everything has its cause and effect. Good causes bring good effects. Sincerity is the greatest virtue, naturally leading to the greatest reward. All is empty. Life is not about enduring suffering, but seeking happiness. However, such happiness is often fleeting and suffering seems endless. Humanity often doesn't know why. Thus, humanity is equally ignorant and suffers from having, while no one suffers from not having. The root of suffering requires self-exploration to gradually understand its rationale. By negating suffering, one can gradually escape it and seek happiness. Zen Master Dao Guang once asked Zen Master Daju Huihai, "Zen Master, with what kind of heart do you usually practice?" Daju replied, "This old monk has no mind to use and no way to practice." Dao Guang said, "Having no mind to use and no way to practice, why do you gather people daily and urge them to practice Zen?" Daju replied, "This old monk has neither a tile above nor land below. Where is the place to gather people?" Dao Guang said, "In reality, you gather people and discuss the way daily." "Isn't that preaching and guiding people?" Daju said, "Don't accuse me wrongly. I don't even have a tongue. How can I lie?" Dao Guang asked, "Does your presence in the mundane world with emotions and relationships and the reality of practicing and preaching Zen mean nothing?" Daju replied, "It is all real." Dao Guang asked, "If it is real, why do you deny it all?" Daju replied, "Falsity must be denied. Reality must also be denied." Finally, Dao Guang attained great enlightenment. Zen Master Daju Huihai denied all embellishments and words, not because he was lying, but because denying everything is the affirmation of all. Zen wisdom. All is empty. Only in this thorough negation can there be absolute affirmation. Calm mind, peaceful world. A devout disciple brought fresh flowers to offer to the Buddha at the temple every day. Zen Master Wu Dei joyfully said, "According to the scriptures, those who often offer flowers to the Buddha will enjoy blessings and a dignified appearance in their next life." The disciple replied, "Every day when I come to the temple to worship the Buddha, I feel as if my soul is cleansed, but when I return home my mind is still troubled. Master, how can I keep a pure heart in the noisy city?" Zen Master Wu Dei asked, "You offer fresh flowers to the Buddha. How do you keep the flowers fresh?" The disciple answered, "The only way to keep flowers fresh is to change the water daily and cut the stems, because the ends of the stems soak in water and can rot, making it hard for them to absorb water and easy for the flowers to wither." Zen Master Wu Dei said, "Keeping a pure heart follows the same principle. Our living environment is like the water in the vase, and we are the flowers. Only by constantly cleaning our body and mind, changing our disposition, and continually repenting, reflecting, and changing our bad habits and shortcomings can we continuously absorb the nourishment of nature." After listening, the disciple was pleased and bowed in gratitude, saying, "Thank you, Master, for enlightening me. I hope to have the opportunity to live close to you, enjoying the life of a Zen practitioner at the temple, hearing the morning bell and evening drum, and experiencing peace through the Bodhi teaching." Zen Master Wu Dei replied, "Your breath is the Bodhi chant, your pulse is the bell and drum, your body is the temple, and your ears are the Bodhi trees. Peace is everywhere. Why wait for the chance to live in the temple? If one cannot eliminate delusions, even living in an ancient temple deep in the mountains cannot maintain the present moment's importance." Zen practice does not require mountains. If the inner fire is extinguished, the heart will be at peace. Zen wisdom. The 28th Patriarch Bodhidharma came to China and transmitted his teachings to Huike and eventually to Huineng, whose stories make people's minds drift into a trance. The idea of directly pointing to the human mind, seeing one's nature, and becoming a Buddha is indeed profound. As Master Hong Yi said, "Zen is natural, without any compulsion." 18. The beggar buys a cake. An elder in a Zen monastery was known for making delicious cakes. The cakes from their monastery were fragrant and sweet, and visitors to the mountain would flock to buy them, enhancing the monastery's prosperity. One day, a beggar dressed in rags came from afar to the monastery, clamoring to try the famous cake. The young monks, seeing the beggar's dirty and shabby appearance, didn't want to let him into the kitchen, leading to a standoff. At that moment, the elder appeared and advised his disciples, "A person who has renounced worldly life must be compassionate. How can you behave like this?" He then personally chose a large cake and respectfully handed it to the beggar. The beggar was deeply moved, and after eating the cake, took out his last 3 coins and said, "This is all the money I have from begging. I hope you will accept it." The elder took the coins, put his hands together, and said, "May you travel safely." The disciples were puzzled and asked, "Why accept money from a beggar?" The elder replied, "The beggar came from afar just to taste our cake. Shouldn't we let him eat for free?" But his gesture of offering all he had shows his understanding of gratitude and respect, so we should accept his coins. This sense of being appreciated and respected may lead him to great success in the future. Decades later, a wealthy merchant came to the mountain to thank the elder for that one meal. This surprised many old monks, as the merchant was none other than the beggar who had offered 3 coins for a cake years ago. Zen wisdom. Offering a cake to a beggar can relieve their hunger, but accepting money from the beggar can preserve their dignity. Filling the stomach solves an immediate need, while preserving dignity can inspire a lifetime. 19. A village of chrysanthemums. One day, a Zen master brought a chrysanthemum plant from the suburbs and planted it in the Zen garden. By the 3rd autumn, the entire Zen garden was filled with blooming chrysanthemums, turning it into a chrysanthemum garden. The fragrant flowers' aroma reached the village below the mountain. Consequently, villagers climbed the mountain to admire the flowers and praised, "The flowers are beautiful." They asked the Zen master for a few plants to take home. After receiving the master's permission, they dug up the roots. People kept coming to ask for flowers until all the chrysanthemums in the Zen garden were taken. Seeing the desolate garden, the disciples lamented to the Zen master, "What a pity, the garden was full of color and fragrance." The Zen master smiled and said, "It is even better this way. In 3 years, this place may become a village of chrysanthemums." The disciples, upon hearing this, smiled brightly. Zen wisdom. Enjoying happiness alone is not as good as sharing it with others. This principle applies to both Confucians and Zen practitioners. 20. Afflictions are Bodhi. 3 sad-faced devotees came to seek guidance from Zen master Wu Dai on the same issue. Seeing the master, they asked, "Zen master, how can we live happily?" The master asked in return, "Why do you live?" The first devotee replied, "I live because I don't want to die." The second said, "I live because I want to have many descendants in a better old age." The third said, "I live because my family depends on me, so I cannot die." The Zen master said, "Then you will never live happily." The 3 were no longer sad and asked the Zen master for further guidance. The master said, "You live in fear of death, waiting for old age, and burdened by responsibilities. These are not the wishes of your heart. They have no ideals or meaning, so how can such a life be happy?" The master asked, "What do you consider happiness?" The first person said, "I think money brings happiness." The second said, "I believe love brings happiness." The third said, "I believe fame brings happiness." The master said, "Not so. If you wait to attain those things, you will suffer even more." The 3 were confused and pleaded for further teaching. The master said, "If after gaining wealth, love, and fame, you are plagued by troubles, anxieties, and greater desires, you will naturally suffer more. To feel comfortable, you must have the concept of letting go and transform your thoughts. Wealth must be given to bring joy, love must be offered to bring happiness, and fame must be used to serve others to find joy. Can you do that?" The 3 devotees then attained sudden enlightenment. Zen wisdom. Pursuing worldly things cannot be forced. Everything must follow natural laws. Giving leads to receiving, and to receive, one must give. This cycle brings joy. Establishing true, meaningful ideals and striving positively eliminates afflictions and brings comfort. 21. A mouthful of beautiful teeth. Zen Master Buddha Light was always compassionate toward his followers, especially concerning their health needs, education, and daily necessities, ensuring they had an ideal monastic life. One day, the head accountant presented a stack of bills and frowned, saying, "Master, lately, many people are suffering from toothaches. Although toothaches are not severe, they are very uncomfortable. The monastery tries to help everyone, but dental treatments are extremely expensive. One person getting a few teeth replaced costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, creating a significant financial burden. Regardless of the difficulty, we must find a way to help," the master insisted. The accountant replied, "These people benefit from the monastery's generosity, but instead of expressing gratitude, they often criticize and show dissatisfaction. I don't think it's worth spending money on them." Zen Master Buddha Light, seemingly talking to himself, said, "These people may say unworthy things, but we cannot let them go without a mouthful of beautiful teeth." Providing good teeth for everyone, allowing them to enjoy the beauty of life, is the joy of Zen. Whether the followers express gratitude or not, doesn't matter to a Zen master who deeply understands the principle of selflessness. Zen wisdom. All Buddhas and sages wish to serve sentient beings, not only to give them beautiful teeth, but to transform their hearts and cultivate good Buddha nature. 22. Difficult to awaken from clinging. There was a man working outside, crossing mountains and rivers and facing great hardships. While passing a steep mountain slope, he accidentally fell into a deep ravine. Clinging desperately to a dry branch, he managed to save his life, but he was stuck midway, unable to climb up or down. Suddenly he saw the Buddha standing on the cliff, looking at him compassionately. The man called out for help. "Buddha, please save me." The Buddha replied, "Saving you is not difficult, but you must follow my instructions." The man said, "In this situation, how dare I not listen to you? I will do whatever you say." The Buddha then said, "Let go of the branch you are holding on to." Upon hearing this, the man thought, if he let go, he would fall into the abyss and be crushed to death. So he clung even more tightly to the branch. Seeing that the man was stubborn and difficult to enlighten, the Buddha left. If you have the guidance of a virtuous and knowledgeable elder, do not dismiss it lightly. Strive to absorb their good experience, and you will be able to resolve your immediate doubts. However, if you are arrogant or stubbornly clinging to your delusions, it will be difficult to escape your predicament. Zen wisdom. The Buddha said, "All teachings are for the salvation of all beings." Clinging to the teachings without understanding them is truly not understanding one's own nature. Such a person cannot be enlightened by the Buddha and cannot be saved. It is truly pitiable. Turning back is a wall. One must awaken and realize, dispelling doubts here and now. 23. Treasure your nature. Zen Master Shihei was traveling outside when he met a young man. They chatted and didn't notice that night had fallen, so they had to stay in an inn. In the middle of the night, the master heard someone sneaking into his room. He shouted, "Who's there?" The intruder, frightened, knelt down. Zen Master Shihei pulled off the black cloth covering the intruder's face and saw it was the young man from earlier. The master said, "So, you are a thief. How many times have you stolen before?" The young man replied, "Countless times." The master asked, "How long does the pleasure of stealing last?" The young man answered, "It depends on how valuable the stolen goods are." The master pressed on, "At its best, how long does the pleasure last?" The young man replied, "A few days at most, then it's no longer enjoyable." The master said, "If you are a thief, why not make a big haul?" The young man asked, "Do you have experience? How many times have you stolen?" Zen Master Shihei replied, "Only once." The young man, puzzled, asked, "Only once? Is that enough?" The master replied, "Although only once, it is enough for a lifetime." The young man, now very curious, asked, "Where did you get it? Can you teach me?" The master grabbed the young man's collar and said sternly, "Do you understand this? This is a treasure beyond measure. You should devote your life to a righteous career and it will last you a lifetime. Do you understand?" This profound revelation awakened the young man from his delusions. Greed for external wealth had blinded him to the infinite treasure within himself. Realizing this, he became a disciple of Zen Master Shihei and eventually became a famous Zen monk. Zen wisdom. When we think we have nothing, we must remember we possess a noble soul. Failure is insignificant. Start anew. Do not succumb to defeat. Heaven and hell coexist in our perceptions. 24. The integrity of heart. People with a Zen mind do not mind worldly slander and strive to seek clear and honest wealth to save the world. How many can understand this heart? Zen Master Yue Quan was a renowned painter who once said, "It's easy to paint a tiger's skin but difficult to paint its bones. It's easy to paint a person's face but difficult to paint their heart." This not only reflected his artistic pursuit but also had a deeper meaning. Zen Master Yue Quan had a habit of insisting on being paid before he started a painting. One day, a lady requested a painting from him. He asked, "How much can you pay?" She replied dismissively, "Whatever you ask, but I want you to paint in front of everyone at my house." Zen Master Yuequan agreed and took his good brush to her house. After finishing the painting and receiving his payment, the lady said to everyone, "This artist is only after money. Although his paintings are beautiful, his heart is filthy. Money has tainted his purity, yet he still wants to be a great Zen master. This dirty work of art is not worthy to hang in my living room. It can only adorn my skirt." She then took off her skirt and asked Yuequan to paint on it. He asked, "How much will you pay?" She replied, "Whatever you want." Yuequan quoted a very high price and painted as she requested, then left immediately. Everyone wondered why a great Zen master would be so greedy and ignore such humiliation. It turned out that Zen master Yuequan's place often suffered from crop failures, and the wealthy wouldn't help the poor. So, he built a granary to store rice for relief efforts. Additionally, his master had vowed to build a temple before he died, and Yuequan wanted to fulfill his master's wish. After completing these missions, Yuequan abandoned painting and retired to the mountains, never painting again. When the lady learned the truth, she felt deep remorse, but also gained enlightenment. Zen wisdom: money is filthy but can be used. The heart is pure but also compassionate. In today's complex society, people no longer pay attention to the innocent words of others. A pure heart is serene. Understanding oneself brings natural peace. 25. The heart and nature are one. A monk came to study under national teacher Huisheng in Nanyang and asked, "Zen is another name for the heart. The heart is unchanging, and true nature does not diminish." The patriarch simplified this into nature. "Master, what is the difference between the heart and nature?" Huisheng replied, "When confused, they are different. When enlightened, they are the same." The monk asked, "The scriptures say that Buddha nature is eternal, but the heart is impermanent. How can you say they are the same?" Huisheng patiently illustrated with an example. "You only pay attention to words, not the meaning. For example, when it's cold, water turns to ice. When it's warm, ice melts into water. When confused, nature becomes the heart. When enlightened, the heart merges back into nature. Heart and nature are fundamentally the same, differing only in confusion and enlightenment." The monk finally understood the heart. Though confusion and enlightenment differ, the heart and nature are fundamentally the same. Like gold, which can be made into earrings, rings, bracelets, and other items, they are different but essentially gold. Similarly, heart and nature may seem different, but they are both our true nature. In Buddhism, there are many terms for heart and nature, such as original face, Tathagata store, Dharma body, true form, self-nature, thusness, essence, true heart, prajna, and Zen. These terms aim to help us understand ourselves. Zen Wiz: the heart is Buddha. Heart and nature are one. Buddha nature is equal. Self-trust is self-establishment. This is the fundamental thought of practitioners. Zen education. In the Zen monastery where Zen Master Xian'ai resided, there was a student monk who often sneaked out at night to have fun. One night, Zen Master Xian'ai discovered a high stool at the corner of the wall. Realizing someone was sneaking out, he quietly put the stool away and stood in its place, waiting for the student monk to return. Late at night, the monk came back, unaware that the stool was gone, and jumped down, landing on Zen Master Xian'ai's head before hitting the ground. The monk was shocked to see the master and didn't know what to do. However, Zen Master Xian'ai did not scold him. Instead, he comforted him, saying, "It's late, the dew is heavy, take care of your health and quickly go inside to put on some more clothes." On another occasion, a couple was arguing. Zen Master Xian'ai advised them, "Even thick snow melts when the sun rises. Cold rice becomes warm when the fire burns. Husbands and wives live together because of fate, and they should be like the sun warming each other, like fire making each other passionate. I hope you respect and love each other." The couple stopped arguing and returned to a peaceful life. Zen wisdom. The best education is love, using encouragement instead of scolding, care instead of punishment, which brings better educational outcomes. Silent Zen Temple. During the later Han Dynasty of the Five Dynasties, Lu Wang invited Zen Master Yunmen and the monks from his temple to the palace for a summer retreat. While in the palace, they were respectfully asked about the Dharma by the palace maids, as Luan was a devout believer. Consequently, discussions on Zen and Dharma teachings were held daily, making the place very lively. The monks would preach to the palace maids and eunuchs. However, Zen Master Yunmen remained silent, meditating quietly on one side, making the palace maids afraid to approach him for guidance. A court official intentionally asked Zen Master Yunmen about the essence of the Dharma, but Yunmen remained silent. The official, instead of being offended, respected him even more and posted a poem in front of the Jade Hall. Great wisdom cultivates Zen. Zen should be silent rather than noisy. A myriad of clever speeches are not as good as the truth. Zen should ultimately remain unsaid. The true Zen practitioner remains silent like thunder. Although no words are spoken, it is a profound revelation. True Zen masters, like wandering cranes in the mountains, wear 3 pieces of clothing, moving with the wind. Even with auspicious opportunities and luxurious palaces, they are not tempted or swayed by power. This is the true realm of Zen, deserving of reverence. Zen wisdom. Silence is the best method of Zen practice. First practice active work, then passive work, gradually progressing to sitting meditation, reaching a state of no self and no ego, where external disturbances cannot penetrate. 28 Worldly eyes see nothing. During the assembly at Mount Gridvakuta, the Buddha held a 10-colored mani gem and asked the 4 heavenly kings, "What color is this mani gem?" After examining it, each heavenly king gave a different answer: green, yellow, red, white. The Buddha then withdrew the gem and asked, "What color is the mani gem in my hand now?" The 4 heavenly kings, puzzled, answered in unison, "Buddha, there is nothing in your hand now, no mani gem." The Buddha said, "I showed you a worldly gem, and you distinguished its colors. But the true precious gem before your eyes, you did not notice. How confused you are." The 4 heavenly kings, upon hearing this, gained insight. The mani gem symbolizes our true Buddha nature. People in the world are often preoccupied with chasing wealth and honor, missing the true essence of life. Zen wisdom. Zen values the sudden enlightenment of the true self, revealing our nature. People are often trapped by desires and materialism, losing their true nature. Zen aims to awaken this nature, freeing our perceptions and hearts. 29 Drop of water enlightenment. Zen Master Nissen was very meticulous about cleanliness and bathed every evening. One day, as the bath water was too hot, he asked his young disciple to bring a bucket of cold water. The disciple obediently brought the water but carelessly spilled the leftover water on the ground. Nissen scolded him, saying, "Foolish boy, why waste even a drop of water? Everything, big or small, has its use. You could water the plants or flowers and give life to the water." Hearing this, the young disciple became enlightened and changed his Dharma name to Drip of Water. This monk later became known as Monk Drip of Water and was highly respected. Zen wisdom. Helping others when needed can be as simple as adding firewood in winter. 30 That is hell. Zen Master Hakuin of the Edo period in Japan was a restorer of the Rinzai school. He shunned fame and lived in small rural temples, spreading the Dharma through writing and teaching. His disciples, such as Tori Enji and Gassen Joseki, were highly intelligent and talented. A samurai visited Zen Master Hakuin, asking, "Zen Master, is hell and paradise real or fictitious? If real, can you personally show me?" Hakuin harshly insulted the samurai's honor, calling him a hypocrite, a rogue. The samurai, though shocked, remained calm, controlling his anger. But when Hakuin mocked his sword skills, the samurai could no longer contain his rage. Drawing his sword, he threatened Hakuin, saying, "You bald-headed rogue, how dare you insult me?" The samurai's eyes blazed with fury, and his sword pointed at Hakuin. Unfazed, Hakuin said, "Didn't you ask to see hell? This is hell." The samurai, realizing his mistake, calmed down and apologized. "I'm sorry, Zen Master, I lost my temper." Hakuin smiled and said, "And this is paradise." Zen teachings say, a righteous thought opens the path to heaven, a wicked thought opens the door to hell. All phenomena arise from the mind. When goodness arises, it is paradise. When evil arises, it is hell. This was the lesson Zen Master Hakuin wanted to impart to the samurai.